Hi, welcome to today's live session on Uranium Investing 101. Let me quickly share my screen. Okay. So, what we're going to talk about today is firstly, of course, trying to understand what we really mean by uranium as a commodity. Then we're going to look at some of the world's top consumers and producers, some of the use cases of uranium, what's it actually used for, the price drivers, like on the supply side and the demand side, what is it that affects the price of uranium? And then we look at some of the data that we have and how do we invest. So, how do uranium stocks work? How do uranium ETFs, futures, and other things work? How can you invest in uranium pads? These are the kind of things that we're going to discuss. It's an interactive session, so please feel free to keep posting your questions as a comment and I'll keep answering them. Now, the first thing that I wanted to explain is that when we talk about uranium, what we need to understand is that it's a radioactive metal which is found. It's quite abundant. It's not like it's a very rare commodity. But what makes it very important is its use to generate huge amounts of energy. So it can be considered to be the most energy dense material on planet Earth. And of course, it needs to be mined, refined, and enriched before it can actually be used. It's not something that you could directly dig out of the earth and start using instantly. A lot of processing needs to go in before we do that. Now, because the world is needing more and more amounts of electricity and energy, especially with artificial intelligence data centers needing huge amounts of energy to fuel them, uranium is beginning to become more and more important. And in most countries of the world, because uranium can also be used as for military purposes, it's not just a commodity, it's also considered a matter of national policy. So it's not something like gold and silver where it's a pure commercial commodity. It actually has a lot of national security implications also. Now, when we look at the consumption, as you can see on the map in front of you, some of the top producers of uranium, they include Kazakhstan, Canada, Namibia, Australia, Uzbekistan, and even others like Russia, Niger, China, and the US. Of course, the US has a very small amount of production that they do. Then, if you look at the top consumers, here you'll be able to see on your screen. So, when we talk about the top consumers, just give me a second. Yeah. So when we're talking about the top consumers, the US probably is the largest. Then we have France, China, Russia, and India. And you also have other countries like South Korea, Canada, UK, Ukraine, and Japan. Although Japan is still recovering from there was this massive tsunami which caused a lot of problems for the nuclear energy being generated. It's also called the Fukushima. So because of that, obviously Japan went a little on the back foot with nuclear energy, but things are beginning to now change. Now, when we look at it, the next thing that we need to understand is what all is uranium used for. So, firstly, is of course electricity generation. Now, that's the primary use case that we are going to talk about. And about 440 reactors are there around the world which rely on enriched uranium as a fuel. Then there are, of course, military applications that would include things like nuclear submarines, aircraft carriers, warheads. Now, this use is obviously controversial, secretive, and it's not tied to the market pricing. Then there are medical isotopes which are derived from uranium and its byproducts, and these are used in cancer treatment, imaging, diagnostics. Then we have, of course, the research reactors in universities and institutions, but that's a very tiny amount. And finally, uranium is also used for space exploration. So these are the kind of use cases that we have. Now, how do we look at investing in uranium? Like, what are the different kinds of methods that are available? So just give me a second. Yeah. So the first thing that we do is we look at uranium stocks. Now, when we talk about uranium stocks, we are talking about stocks of uranium miners, developers, and even nuclear fuel service companies. So here there's a small list which you can have a look at. I'll add it as a comment also. You can get to this URL. So Cameco is one of them, China National Nuclear Power, BWX Technologies. There's a whole list of these companies which are global companies, all listed on stock markets and accessible to individual investors. So that's definitely something that you could have a look at. Now, for each of these, I've provided the links here. You can click and get more detailed information about each. But then that's a call you have to take. I won't be able to really advise you on which of the stocks are good and which are not. But this is the list of the top uranium stocks that are there. I find more interesting are the uranium ETFs and physical trusts. So an ETF, as you know, is an exchange traded fund. So that's one way of looking at it. So there are two primary ones, the Sprott and the URA. And then there is the Sprott Physical Uranium Trust. Now, the beauty of the Physical Uranium Trust is they are actually holding billions of dollars worth of uranium physically. And by investing in that trust, you could be a part owner of that physical uranium which is there. Now, obviously, you don't have to bother about the storage, transportation, or any of these other things. That's taken care of by the trust. So their website and documents have all the details, and definitely you can go through that before you make an informed decision. Then there are also futures which are available on CME. That's another way that you could look at. And finally, that if you are crypto friendly and you are looking for something which is more on DeFi or decentralized finance, then you could look at the price action tokens. So Sara AI has brought a lot of commodities through price action tokens on the blockchain. So these are synthetic instruments that replicate the price movements of commodities like uranium without you obviously requiring to do any physical ownership or storage. Now, when we look at the pricing, it's a little important to understand that the pricing of uranium is not available the way, for example, you would get it for gold and oil and silver, where every second the price is changing. Uranium is not really works like that. So, firstly, there is a spot price for uranium. That is for uranium that is going to be delivered within 12 months. Then there is a long term price which covers the multi year contracts. That could be 1 to 5 years with fixed indexed or market linked pricing. Now, these contracts can also use different kinds of pricing structure. And here I've provided a list of rates from 1988 to 2025. So that's about 35 years plus of rates which are available. Now, for every month, you'll notice here there is a spot price and the long term price. And those are not obviously going to be exactly the same. There is going to be a substantial difference between them. For example, for last month, it was spot was 80, whereas the long term price was 85. This is a small graph which shows you the divergence. So as you can see, sometimes the spot and long-term price can have a huge divergence, which is available here. And then we also have the spot prices available from 1988 to 2025. So this is per year. So you can see what the open price of the year is, the high, the low, and the close. So all of this data should be able to help you to make an informed decision on whether you want to invest in uranium or not. The final thing that I'd like to talk about is what moves the price of uranium. Now, when we look at it from the supply side, obviously the most important thing that is going to work is the production decisions by the major producing countries like or the companies like Amoco and Kazamtom. So we need to see whether they are curtailing or restarting any supply. That is going to have a direct impact. The geopolitical stability is going to be something which we need to look at. Obviously, wars and all have huge impact on uranium prices. Then there is the government policy on mining permits, environmental approvals, and export controls. These can have a huge amount of impact. Then there is, of course, secondary supply. So, some of the warheads, they may get decommissioned. So that brings uranium back into the market, that effect. And of course, the enrichment capacity. From the demand side, we see the reactor builds and restarts, the energy policy shifts, the public perception, obviously, the fuel inventory cycles, technology adoptions. All of this needs to be considered. Now, if you look at the chaos variables or the X factors, then definitely war or conflict is one of them. Sanctions or trade restrictions against some of the major players like Russia. Accidents or meltdowns, if they happen. Fusion breakthrough. So that's not really likely in the short term, but that could definitely impact some kind of technological advancements in the way uranium is used and consumed. Nationalization or resource control and speculative hoarding, like some of the investment trusts, they actually hold billions of dollars worth of uranium. So that can also have an impact on the price. Now, if you do have any questions, feel free to post them even later and I'll be able to answer them. So that's kind of the introduction that I wanted to give today. Thanks a lot for joining the session. Bye bye.